The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me remind everyone, today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's an official podcast of NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Cooper Lighting Solutions, and their new WaveLinx DALI platform. If you're not familiar with this new feature that's additional to the WaveLinx ecosystem, I highly recommend you check it out because it really does expand what WaveLinx can do, giving you that DALI 2 interoperability in your lighting control solutions, so you can kind of expand out into the DALI ecosystem as well, while still having your WaveLinx products alongside everything that you've known throughout the WaveLinx ecosystem that you use. And so I definitely recommend you check them out, cooperlighting.com, and do a search for WaveLinx DALI. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have Martin from Cooper. Martin, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Webster. Thanks, everybody. Martin Mercier. I was brought in to connect the lights a few years ago. We will get into that later probably, but I'm the strategic marketing manager for connected systems and connected buildings here at Cooper Lighting Solutions, responsible for commercialization. I'm happy to be here to talk about a few things here, including DALI.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. And, it's timely because we just had somebody on in our previous episode talking about DALI and some of the friction points regarding implementation. And so, from your perspective, like, what is going on with DALI, and where do people kind of sit when it comes to DALI?
Yeah, I thought DALI was the European protocol lighting control. Why are we talking about that now today here? DALI came from far, right? DALI was obviously created in Europe, basically, North American manufacturers jumped on it, but we had challenges, right? But it was basically born in Europe, and it was backed out by the IEC standards, which is gospel there, not here, and
right.
It was pushed by the building energy standards there, and as you might know, Europe is about 5 to 10 years ahead of us when it comes to building and energy standards, right? So they were forced into a better lighting control solution to be on par with the IEC requirements. And but that DALI 1 legacy protocol, because that what it was when it started, right? It was basically a protocol, a digital way of programming lights, right, and creating groups, but then that solution ended up being a closed system, and interoperability was a nightmare, and we can all pretty much know about it. If we don't, we have somebody that knows about it.
Right.
Not too far, right? So it was a nightmare. It was and that model didn't work, right? It didn't take real long. As soon as we got to the maintenance part of these products, these DALI legacy products, that would not work for very long, because you cannot really maintain well, or in an easy way, I guess, at the very least. Not even talking about the commissioning, right, which was pretty heavy. So we came from DALI. Now is a whole different story, right?
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting how Europe just sort of like embraced it as well, because it really has kind of become sort of the standard there, whereas over here we really haven't adopted it over here. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think the friction points are?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things, right? So we got lucky enough that at the time that the energy building standards started to be more prominent, right? Starting from California for most of it and down to the whole nation. that other technologies were available, right? A little bit like the Sony mini disc, right? That came out, and then the MP3 players came out at the same time in Europe, and had all those little shiny, nicely looking discs. But here we happened to got into it when the MP3 players were coming out with the iPlayer and other things, right? Other manufacturers did the same thing. So we didn't really need that technology. So kind of the same thing that happened here with Zigbee coming out, right? And being I'll say powerful enough to be used for ambient lighting controls, even outdoor lighting control, right? When we talk about thousands of nodes and quite a distance between poles, right? For a parking lot, you can look at 200-foot distance between two poles sometime. On a street, you might have a line of products, a line of fixtures, and have to hop up between 1 to 10 fixtures. So pretty powerful, I guess powerful enough that it gave us an easier button, right, to deploy network lighting control. So that's kind of part of it. But overall, yes, the problems, there were many challenges with the legacy DALI system. We talked about interoperability. That's definitely one. The commissioning is probably the next one. That was the biggest problem. And techie guys like us kind of enjoyed it, right, to go and program and see the light flashings, but it took way too long, and it cost a lot of money too to send technicians out there, and not even to mention those that had to do it didn't care about it, and they ended up doing it anyways, and it got burned to the process. And then as I mentioned earlier, the maintenance of it, right? So what happened once the wall station started failing? The contractor or the maintenance person or facility manager will probably call the next distributor he knows about and ask for this model that looks like this, and then get it on site and then install it, and nothing's working. And if it's working, well, it's not as it used to be. So that was probably the three most important major issues that we ran into with the legacy DALI. Sure.
Well, and so, I mean, we've had the DALI Alliance on the show before talking about DALI 2 and, the innovations that they've layered on top of the legacy DALI to beef it up and address some of those concerns. From your perspective as a manufacturer, since you're pretty much offering it with your products, it sounds like you believe that it has solved those issues.
Correct. So looking at DALI 2, right? Looking at the new generation of DALI, there's many reasons why using DALI, right? So we are in the world right now where digitalization of our assets is prominent, right? And there's many examples out there outside of the lighting industry that you can tell how much we're getting digitalized at the end of the day, want it or not. I get quiz results from my kids at the second they're done with their quiz. I didn't even get a paper telling me that they failed. Doesn't happen often, or they got an A+. But I'm still getting that email when I'm at work and looking at my watch. Oh, you got whatever A+ on that quiz that I don't care about. But yeah, I get it, right? So it's happening across the board, and we're part of it. And the lighting is the backbone of a lot of building communication. Not everything. Don't get me to the BMS and other type of communication we have in buildings. We're a smaller part of the world, but the world of the buildings, obviously. But we are part of it, right? We're in buildings, and we contribute by a big factor to the energy savings. So that's number one. I mentioned energy code, so that's the second reason why, right? Coding is to get it more efficient and green building incentives and so on. We are part of it. We need to help there with lowering the energy usage. We're just following not too far from the building HVACs, right? Equipment and so on. The third one is we're getting fancier with lighting too, right? We have solutions that goes beyond lighting control. And they can enable beyond lighting controls functionalities and features and benefits, right? So we all heard about tunable white lately. It's happening, right? And those are the benefits of tunable white were hard to pin down, right, as a hard number, but now the science is catching up, and it's been probably 10, 20 years, not more than that we realized that the color of the light had a big impact on us. And that mostly because of the LEDs, right? We had to go deeper to understand what's the impact of the blue, the navy blue that we have, and with that technology, such technology, and then we realized, whoa, it's more complex than what we perceive. It's a spectrum that has different colors, and we happen to need some of the cyan blue because, hey, it's the color of the sky, and it tells us that it's the day or it's the night. So and mostly for healthcare, right? The practitioner there understand really well that science. So how do you enable these things, right? You might want to do a tunable white project with different volts, but good luck for the cycling, right? And good luck for the maintenance of the system. You'll see that DALI is not too bad at that point, but the DALI 2 enabled these beyond lighting proposals, right, or value prop, if you will, and I mentioned building, so we're close to other verticals within the building where we can help. And how? Well, as we all know, sensing is important. So being able to tell if there's people in the room or not is one thing. We happen to need sensors to create schedules and provide better dimming, if you will, or more aggressive dimming, but as long as there's nobody in the room, right? But that sensing, the value of that, the data that's the lighting is catching up by knowing if there's somebody in the room or not, is way beyond your savings, right? If you can share that with other systems or other verticals. So DALI enables that, right? So, and it can go up to real-time locating systems, right? Where we have tags and then we are everywhere in the building, we have lights everywhere. So if you happen to have connected lights, right, through Zigbee or other technologies, then you need to add some tags to it and you can enable a lot of tracking, right? So those things needs to be digital systems based, and DALI is still one of the best solutions when it comes to wired. And I mentioned hospitals. Hospitals prefer wired lighting controls for many reasons. So your DALI system is still the best foundation you can get for that.
So you mentioned sort of digitization, right? And like you said, we see it everywhere in all of our everyday lives now. Like you mentioned with your kids' quizzes and stuff. Everyone else is moving that way. All the other systems have moved that way. What do you see as sort of the biggest pain point? Why is lighting still stuck in an analog age? Why are, all the lights are digital. The communication between the driver and the physical LED is digital. Why are we still stuck in this age where we're running analog wire to these fixtures when we have digital protocols like DALI and other things out there that are capable of providing us that platform to have all these enhancements that you're talking about, the additional, information that we can gather from sensors, sharing between other groups and other organizations, and being able to share that data with HVAC or whoever else needs it. So how do we start to push forward and get out of this analog age that we seem to be so stuck in?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer, right, to answer that question. But there's many answers, right? And I have a piece of the puzzle, I guess, on my end that I would say that it's probably the number one thing that comes to mind. It's education, right? Those are complex things. It's not easy. Nobody will say it's easy, but it's getting easier, if I can put it that way, when it comes to the DALI 2 and whatever came after the legacy DALI 1 systems, and we'll touch base on that. But education is number one. Understanding what it is super important for all the stakeholders in the value chain. And and we have to remind, I think we'll talk DALI here, there's other wired lighting control protocols and systems that exist out there. But when it comes to ambient lighting and IoT-based value props, which I'm going to touch on as well later, DALI is the right solution. It's still the best solution we have from a lighting industry standpoint, including North America. But we need to educate stakeholders on it. We need to keep on telling the story, as I like to say. And those that are listening, you have to get in and try, right? If you didn't try yet, and you have to contribute to the whole ecosystem, to our lighting industry by giving a shot at it and learning from doing it. That's the best way to learn. We're forced into it with, building energy standards, right? That's some states and some different locations, areas, sometimes cities too, are on different legislation. But so that's a good proof for me that it's working well in those areas. So it's not easy at the beginning, but you do end up working with the same specifiers, the same contractors, sometimes facility managers, and it does get easier as soon as you started it and worked on it. And then the second, third, and fifth one are easier to deploy and actually are fun to do at some level. But we have to remind everybody on why DALI, I guess, right? So DALI is the proper, as I mentioned, the best. It was created for the lighting industry, by the lighting industry. And it's not an RS-485 communication protocol, as a lot of us would like to think, the whole printers and industrial communication that we used to use, because it's for many reasons, it's polarity free. You can flip the wires and it will still be working, which is important. Topology
Well, and
free.
that's why I always say, DALI is easier to install than 0 to 10.
Right.
Correct. It's harder to test if you want to get some type of signal that, hey, it's working on that. It's digital, right? So 0 to 10 volt Contractor will like it because they can put a meter on it and see, all right, I get 7, I get 10, whatever. It seems to be working, kind of. So that's the complexity of the digital system, right? You have to find another way to test your wiring, but on that end, it's also topology free. You don't have to use daisy chain. You can use a star, and that makes it also robust against the noise. So I did some project in industrial space with 485, and you would start a machine later on, and then boom, everything is gone, nothing is working, communicating anymore. That's not the case with DALI. And most of the time, you don't need fancy shield cables. That was a big part with 485, and I go back to 485 because that was the system prior DALI, probably that was the closest to a DALI system, with the early Modbus communication computers. But I'm not that old, by the way. I just happened to live through it and have to do
You're
one
just
project.
a nerd like us.
Yeah. So it was made by the lighting industry for the lighting industry, and all of these things, polarity free, topology free. You don't need a fancy shield cable to deploy. Right. In many cases, you can put your cables inside the same conduit for the line voltage, right? So those are the reasons why we have to remind ourselves sometime why we're using DALI. But then the turning point, right, is DALI 2.0, right? This is where I really think that we went from a closed ecosystem, right, to opening to many vendors, manufacturers, so open system. So we're not the Apple of the world, anymore. We open, and this is really complex. It's like, oh yeah, it's easy. Everybody's using USB, right? But remember, right? Apple had their own charger for a little while.
Right.
Yep.
They had their own, and they fought it as much as they could. They were claiming that an open standard will slow down innovation, and we're talking about this thing here. Right.
Right.
A cable.
For those who are listening and not watching, he's holding up a USB cable. But yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And that's one of the things that comes up a lot on the podcast is this proprietary nature that we're in the US. Yeah. And the fact that if you buy one company's product, you're stuck with that one company's product for everything else. And that's one of the promises of DALI is this open capability of being able to mix things in. And so I think that's why people like me and Ron want to see DALI take off, because we want to have that ability to go, well, I like this keypad, but I like that sensor, and I like this dimmer. And you can make that choice if they all communicate on DALI.
And also, as I mentioned earlier, what happened after a year or so, 2 years, 10 years within the building. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of customers had to change completely A to Z their lighting control because the manufacturer disappeared, or changed their system, or discontinued the actual system, right? So that's the pain of innovation, right? Sometimes you have to let go of the legacy because it doesn't get upgraded in an easy way, and you have to pivot to another platform. But with DALI 2, we're looking at solving that problem with certified products. So not everybody is Apple. Apple has that. They're awesome by what they have done from an innovation standpoint, but they control the whole value chain, right? Hardware, software, communication, and even down to services, right? With the all the stores and everything. But not everybody can do that. And we learned it the hard way in the lighting industry, right? So now we're getting to the open network, and also, we're talking about communication and lighting control, but we touch a little bit on beyond lighting, but the beyond lighting is as important. It's not prominent as lighting controls, but it's a place we can go, us, the lighting industry, because we're everywhere. We have lights everywhere, every corner of every street,
and
every
because
building,
of energy
every floor.
code, we have to have devices everywhere as well, and so we have the visibility to kind of see what's going on within projects. And so having that data collection, that IoT, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, Internet of Things, you're just enabling a device to connect to the internet and share data. But having that ability layered on top of the lighting controls really gives it that robust nature. And so, from your perspective, have you seen, IoT applications with DALI?
Definitely, yeah. And I have an interesting story about IoT. And for those who wonder, okay, what's the difference? We're talking about connected systems, and we're talking Zigbee, Bluetooth, mesh, and then wired, obviously, two-wire or bus control or CAN bus, and then we get to IoT. So what is it, right? And within our own industry, we've been talking IoT since Lightfair 2015, probably, right? But by the way, if you happen to attend trade shows in North America that are not lighting focused, nobody knows about that. I attended many healthcare trade shows, ASHI, PDC Summit, HIMSS. We were at Wilcom last week, 2 weeks ago, with the DALI Alliance. So I'm now a member of the North American DALI Alliance team, and thank you. Yeah, back to DALI a little bit, but yeah, it's starting getting known, but not enough. So I was talking education earlier between us, the lighting industry, but beyond the lighting industry needs to be done. It's not clearly understood the position we have in the building and how much we can contribute to the building, right? So it's important. But back to your question, what is the number one principle from an IoT device? Mm-hmm. Have you ever wondered what it was? And I know what it is because I've learned through the hard way what it was. But it is identification. The number one thing an IoT device does is telling what the device is, when it comes to lighting is I'm a fixture, I'm a sensor, I'm a controller with an address, right? I'm number 7, I'm number 13. That's the foundation of IoT. And it started back in the 90s, right? Where they developed RFID technology, which happened to work for after school. I worked for a startup for 2 years and we were doing IoT.
Well, just to stop you for a second, in case people aren't familiar with RFID, do you mind just giving a quick definition of that?
Yeah, radio frequency identification. I didn't realize that. I remember that, but yeah, it's the base of it, right? So we used to do chips, and that's how I got to 485 projects within industrial space. We were tracking hooks and packages and animals, and creating a connected ecosystem, to track the meat, basically. We did the same thing for casino gaming industry. But the most important was this chip is $100 chip. This is that cow. This is that package, right? Mm-hmm. So a short story about why IoT and lighting. A while ago, I was working as electronic engineer in Double E, and I was hired to connect the lights. That's how they got me in. So my first reflex was, all right, I'm going to be using RFID for poles, right, and fixtures, and then Zigbee came in, and one of the first early projects, I guess, that I had to contribute to as a lighting manufacturer was to integrate radios and sensors, but mostly radios, into fixtures. And it was with the city of San Jose, and it was not the first one, but it was one of the first ones. And they asked me to provide a dimming curve. I'm like, hey, fairly easy job. So I asked the lab to do the dimming curves, but at that time, in those days, 2009 probably, 2008, I'm not too sure, but we were using a bunch of manufacturers for drivers, right? We had all flavors of wattage and lumen output, and I had a matrix with about 50 flavors of one post up power and lumen outputs, and it was a shit show, really, because you had a swing of 30%, and that was only us at that time. It was Lumec, and that was like, oh shit, and I don't know what to tell. So I called the salesperson. I said, hey, I don't know what to answer because it won't look cute. It will be ugly because it's a swing. And he said, well, tell the truth, right? And he was smart because he knew he had more business to do in that city than that pilot of 20 lights, right? So I called him and I said, hey, I'm going to tell you about this, but you won't like it. It's a more than 30% swing sometime. And as we know, dimming down more than 30% has an impact per IES guidelines, right? RP8 and so on. So I was in trouble. But then I realized after hanging up, I said, hey, I'm not the only one in trouble. All manufacturers are using the same drivers, right? Right. But I happened to be part of Philips Lighting at that time. And then I knew that some of my folks down in Eindhoven were working DALI drivers. And I ended up testing the lab, and I realized, oh, those are really dimming in a way that you can trust, right? And it will be precise. So I called back the salesperson in the city of San Jose and said, hey, I have a solution. We could use DALI drivers, and you would have to get it certified on site by UL because those are all only CE. But hey, it's working. We're an LED platform, and it'll be precise dimming. So not too long after, I had the same conversation with somebody from Georgia Power, Kevin, not to mention him. Hi, Kevin, if you're listening, about DALI. And we were talking about photocell dimming. And I realized, well, we're talking about like 10,000 nodes, photocells working with a bunch of fixtures. Do you think this is going to be dimming the right way all the time? No, not at all. You stand no chance. It's going to be all across the board from 50%, 100%, maybe above 100% per your standards. So you have to figure out a solution. And I have one, DALI. But it happened to work with the European lighting control manufacturer at that time. So DALI controls, when he asked them about it, said, well, yeah, we do have DALI controls. And I said, hey, I have DALI drivers. So we started that way. And the first thing I was asked to do in that project for Georgia Power was to create a spreadsheet with all of our fixture we're going to be providing. And then I was like, okay, I need to create like this line by line. This is a pink looking fixture with 97 controller and a twist lock, and good luck finding which one it is. So then I kind of asked my teammates at Advance, right? Is there any way we can program the drivers, because we're using DALI? So we might be able to get that MAC address of the driver. And then they said, well, we can do better than that, Martin. We can give you a space. You know, we have EEPROMs on there. We'll give you a space. Just put your data in there, and you can name your whatever robot fixture A, and it would be like 010101, whatever, 8 byte, and do the same thing. And then I said, well, we can do that. I can share that information with the customer, and they can gather information from other manufacturers using DALI drivers as well. So I didn't realize that at that point, but we were starting an IoT project. Basically, we were giving the address, the name, you know, we were giving basically a name to our fixtures. So that started all that project called Sensor Ready at Philips. And Sensor Ready was about programmable drivers that you can name and provide information, and then it grew to metering information and grew to power, right? You can power your device through an internal power bus. But the biggest question was, okay, but how do we do that at a larger scale? So the team in Rosemont started, and she was doing that, started gathering devices from many vendors and certifying devices like URSR ready, right? Or SR certified in that case, as a photocell, as a sensor, and that way we could control, right, the ecosystem, the open ecosystem. But that wasn't enough, right? Because a private entity doing it, you want to have like a neutral entity doing that. So we end up working with DALI Alliance at the time to create the DFOI. So the DFOI, you know, that comes after DALI 2, which is outdoor and indoor, is your answer as a lighting industry to the IoT. It's providing a name of the device. It is a certified way of having an ecosystem of devices, right? And it's open. And then it allows to have different roles on a fixture. So I'm pointing like I have a Cobra head, but it could be a truck, a strip. I know many type of flavors, but it doesn't matter, right? It's a point of connection, and that point of connection can have a control, a sensor, which is most of the time combined when it comes to indoor, and data. You know, so I mentioned naming is important. The second thing that is important, second principle for IoT is the data. How do you gather the data? How do you treat that data? Are you making an action on site at the fixture level of the data by going up and down with the fixture? Are you backing up that data somewhere in the cloud and use it later for reports? This is as important. Otherwise, it's not relevant, right? The communication. Are you communicating through internet, 5G? That was as an example for outdoor, mesh networking, wired control. And what is the last one? You know, you might think about it, or you might know based on what I've said. But there's a fourth one. So, do you have any idea? The fourth one is. Go ahead.
No, I'm drawing a blank. What about you, Ron?
I have no idea.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, it's the sensing, right? So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that it's obvious, right? But you have the naming, the communication, the sensing to create that data, right? And then the data itself. So all of this for the lighting industry needed to be defined. So how you do that, right? We kind of did it while working networking and connected systems, but the D4I became the foundation because it can do all of that. And at one point, when it comes to IoT, your device's communication, right? Your internal device bus, right? Doesn't have to be standard.
Right.
It has to be manufactured in perhaps industry standard, but it doesn't have to be a Zigbee or 5G. Only outside of the devices has to be standard. So we, the lighting industry, I'm not sure who was part of that conversation, but at least some of us decided that DALI was the right foundation for the D4I versus USB versus whatever else we had, 485. And so DALI was the right foundation because, hey, we happen to have a ton of drivers that talk DALI already. But also it was robust enough to be inside fixtures and to do that internal bus communication. So if you compare it to other industries, like take Samsung washing machines, they have their own communication protocol inside their machines, but you don't care about that, right? As long as you can hit, dry and whatever, and whatever cycle you picked, and then on your app you can tell your dryer is again blocked or did not dry or clean, or you have to clean that filter, whatever. You don't care about the inside of the machine. So that's our inside protocol, D4I, and it's certified in a way that you can have devices that have a role, so controller, sensor, driver, and then most importantly, it's open to other devices that are not lighting specific. And this is where the value is. Energy saving is just a starting point. Beyond lighting is where the money is, right? And we have to get there. And D4I is our way, the lighting industry, to provide that open ecosystem for beyond lighting, value props that goes through real-time locating system, RTLS, right? Wayfinding, and all these things that are blue sky ideas are happening. Not at the scale I wish it was, but it is happening. And we need to have a solid base for that. And D4I is coming for that, right? And it's from us, by us, for the beyond lighting industry proposals.
Yeah, and beyond lighting is obviously, it's super important, but I think a lot of people struggle with just even the basics of the digital lighting. And so I just want to back up a little bit, because there's a couple of things that are so important that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to and gloss over. The idea that you can name your devices and get information back from them. People, I don't think, understand how important that is. It doesn't matter if you're looking at a ceiling of 30 fixtures or 300 fixtures. You can identify that individual light when you're on a digital protocol like DALI. You can't do that with an analog protocol. If you have 0 to 10 fixtures linked together, there's zero information. They all turn on and off together. The other thing that you mentioned was dimming curves, right? And how important that dimming is. When you have a digital driver like DALI and you tell those fixtures to go to 20%, every one of those fixtures is going to be at 20%. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, no questions. When you're on an analog system, if you've got 10 fixtures in that 0 to 10 loop, right, or in that 0 to 10 line, there is a extremely high likelihood that last fixture and a bunch of the others are going to be at a very different intensity level than the first fixture, simply based on cable length, voltage drop, right? All these really simple things. And this is part of why I don't understand why getting digital protocols like DALI into these newer buildings is so difficult. Right, we can look at all the advantages of moving forward and moving into the IoT space and beyond lighting. But the fact that we're having such a hard problem getting people to understand the benefits, the simple benefits of a digital driver, is one of, I think, the key pitfalls of why we're not getting this pushed forward. So we try to sell all these amazing features and ideas, but how do we really kind of simplify it and bring it back and make people understand the advantages of moving to a digital system? It's just at the simplest levels, so that we can get the adoption from the contractors. Because you could sell the owner all day, but if we don't have buy-in from all these contractors who are physically doing the installation, they're going to stick with what they know, which is what we see time and time again.
No, this is definitely true, right? And the blue sky ideas that we just went through and coming back to down to her day-to-day work. We're talking about lighting control, and I have nothing against 0-10 volt, right? It's useful in some cases in the right protocol. But to your point, when it comes to project, and as an example, that includes different levels, different grouping, right? Different zones. You can't really do that with 0-10 volts, right? For many reasons, as you mentioned. Take just a K-12 class, right? Now with monitors and different type of activities happening in the class, it's more dynamic than it used to be. You might want to have a zone where the teacher is teaching and might have different scenes that will be used depending on the activity happening. Are we watching a screen? Are we looking at the board? Are we looking at the demo, whatever, on a table? Are we reading? Are we focusing? Are we playing? So all of these things, happening with different scenes in the class are hard to do with 0-10 volt, right? And plus, the building now are dynamics, right? They are changing. They are adapting. And I think going forward, that's the word that always comes to my mind when I think about AI. It's adapting to the new situation. We had COVID, we had supply chain issues, we had over the last 5, 6, 7 years, right? But it's the same thing going forward. It won't change. We'll have to adapt to something. And I didn't mention tariff, but that's another one too that we had to adapt to. So DALI gives you at some level that adaptation. You might want to think wireless in some cases because it's easier to adapt your space. You don't have the wiring. You have battery-equipped sensors, battery-equipped wall stations. So the wireless helps you further. But still, from a flexibility standpoint on the wired lighting control, the DALI gives you that. And you mentioned it earlier. You can have an address. You can program. You can regroup these things once if the class change. If it's not a class anymore, it happens to be an office, you can easily readapt your space, right? So for those basic lighting control proposals, and I took the class as an example, but you can expand to the gymnasium, you can expand to other spaces in the school, an hospital, a retail, office space, right? For that reason, you want to have DALI because it's going to be easier, simpler, and cost effective at the end.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'm curious, from the Cooper perspective, why is this an embrace that you're leaning into? Because as you brought up with Apple, it's so easy to just stay in your closed loop system and say, okay, well, WaveLinx products, WaveLinx project, that's it. That's what you get, and you got to stick with it. But a lot of manufacturers that I've spoken to about embracing open standards of any kind, let alone, a protocol, they push back and say, well, we don't want to be the first ones because then we're just going to get, eaten alive. And so, what is there's a perspective there that seems to have shifted at least a little bit.
Yeah, we, if I talk WaveLinx specifically, our goal, at Cooper was to have one system, really. We talked about interoperability and maintenance and future ready. I don't like future proof, but as much as we can, try to integrate into a development and system launches and life cycle a future ready solution, right? So number one thing was to have one system that does it all. If we can't be interoperable between our own devices, how can we ask the industry to be, right?
Right.
But as soon as you say that, right, DALI comes somewhere into play solving some of your issues, right?
Right.
So it had to come to WaveLinx at one day or another. We knew it was coming. We had a legacy DALI system, but we knew that we had to build from scratch because WaveLinx is a native hybrid platform. When I say native is, yes, Cooper grew in their system portfolio by acquiring different solutions, in-house building or in-house creation of solutions and partnerships and M&As. But at the end of the day, we knew that the future was a different place, which is one system for all. So we started from the baseline of using WaveLinx, which is a system that was built at Cooper, and it's a home system. Everything was built in mostly, and then grew inside Cooper too and evolved as a Cooper native system. So then we added to it. So WaveLinx was a Zigbee system. It's still a Zigbee system. That's our pro technology. We added Bluetooth, which is our light technology. Recently, 2 years ago, we had CAT, which is a bus communication system, wired system with CAT cables. We added panels, so we still need panels to control different areas. You know, I talked about the school example. Well, your parking lot might be controlled. For a panel is within what you need, maybe way more than what you would need in terms of controls, or your gymnasium, right? So we added the panel offering pre-built panels that we connect to the same app, to the same ecosystem. So the next piece was DALI. So we just added the DALI technology a few months ago. And to answer your question, interoperability is definitely one, but we wanted to stress the flexibility beyond, you know, what WaveLinx was already, a wired and wireless system, by adding an open ecosystem. So that's interesting because you're adding an open ecosystem. We can do a full-blown campus DALI, you know, as one system. It will be WaveLinx DALI technology across the board. But if you wish to, you can have wireless. It's the same app. It's the same system. You know, you can use the same system and have some DALI wired devices out there, which long-term could be maintained and supported as DALI 2 devices. So they're certified devices. You can go on the DALI Alliance website and scroll down all the DALI certified device, and then longer term, it's easier to maintain. You have different choices. You're not locked in with us with WaveLinx. You still have to think about who you're using as a start. I mentioned Apple, right? So it's a closed ecosystem, high innovative space, right? But when it comes to open system, and that's the reason why they didn't want to change to USB key earlier, a few years ago, because it was slowing down their innovation. Well, you have to slow down sometime with standards, to be on pair with other manufacturers. And then some of you might have been part of SDO, right? Working as standard working groups, and you have to listen to everybody at the table, and you have to come to a common point where we think the 7 pins is the right way to dim a fixture, right? Or so on, right? Many ways, but so that's the challenge with standards. So when you pick your supplier, when you pick your DALI system, you always have some nuggets, right? Some features and benefits that might slightly be different than the other system, but the baseline would be compatible, right? Would be interoperable. So for us, for WaveLinx, adding DALI to an ecosystem that already had wireless, that already had panels, and WaveLinx Core, which is our platform, you don't have to use a server-based platform. That would be more for your beyond lighting proposals, such as, RTLS, I mentioned earlier, real-time tracking system, and to go into the bigger world of the building, right? Contributing with APIs, with sharing data and receiving data and so on, so we're talking about beyond lighting there. But all of this is the same ecosystem. So the value of DALI was really to open the wired side of our lighting control system to a standardized and certified world of products,
That's awesome. So, all right. So so for people we've spent a lot of time obviously talking about DALI and how you've now incorporated it into WaveLinx in that platform. So why don't you give us the elevator sales pitch for people who are looking at, right, their next lighting control system? Why should, if they're familiar with system A or system B, it doesn't matter. Why should they look at Cooper and look at WaveLinx specifically moving forward? What advantages do you have in your system? It sounds like there's a bunch, right? By being able to have wired, wireless, and all these other options. But give us the elevator sales pitch. Why Cooper WaveLinx?
Yeah, if I had to tell somebody in 30 seconds why WaveLinx, the number one thing that comes in mind is it is a Cooper lighting control system that includes a lot of fixtures, different various type of fixtures. We mentioned earlier troughers, downlights, outdoor fixtures, strips, architectural fixtures, which are more complex sometimes to control, right? But we have a pretty solid lighting portfolio. And I hate to say that, but I'll say it again, I guess. One throat to choke, right? I hate that expression. I keep on saying it. I have to figure out another expression for that. But yeah, you have one vendor, one manufacturer So your ecosystem is coming from the same place, and it was tested, validated, and we talked about tunable wire earlier. So we have a platform called BioWub that does circuit and rhythm. So I can tell you when I'm comparing sphere data between fixtures, it can be highly different when it comes to renderings and colors and and spectrum results. So I know how important it is to control that space, and this is tunable wire related, but it's the same thing across the board when it comes to dimming, as we mentioned, and also maintenance of these fixtures. So one manufacturer, Cooper Lighting, and a WaveLinx control platform. So the second one is, and I know I passed 30 seconds, so hopefully you're still with me.
It's a long elevator ride.
Really high. We probably have like Empire States to go, but stay with me. So the second one is hybrid. You do need flexibility on site. And I'm really hoping that any agencies out there, but mostly our Cooper agents, are maximizing results by using our flexibility with wired and wireless controls. At the end of the day, if you do a school, I'll take the school example because I started earlier with the school example. You want to have, your classes with different type of room scenes, and you might want to go wire control there, your corridors, and then you have gymnasium where the distance to cover with wiring might not be practical, and you probably want to use, a Zigbee solution, and then the parking lot, right? You want to wire your fixtures there? Well, power, yes, but control, probably not. It's easier to use your Zigbee solution. If you don't need to have a sensor on the pole, you're not in California or any other places where ASHRAE 90.1 comes in, right? As a sensor requirement for 20-foot high or low or higher, then you might want to use a panel in that case, right? And just control your zoning by on-off perhaps. But yeah, you want to have an hybrid solution where you can benefit from the best of the two worlds, a DALI solution, in maybe a CAT solution, or in a wireless solution, pro solution in our case. And then it looks the same from the end user standpoint. The sensors are looking the same, the wall stations, most of it are looking the same. At least we have the portfolio to cover most of it. If not, we will in a few months from now. And from an end user, it's the same thing. It's a button they're pressing and the scenes are happening the same. And all of this programmed with one app. So you're looking at DALI devices, looking at your panel, you're looking at your wireless devices, the pro devices. It's the same thing, the same ecosystem. So when it comes to DALI specifically, one of the goals I mentioned, interoperability was important for WaveLinx, so we added DALI. Well, the second one is, hey, we're going to make it simple and easy. We don't want to hear again about DALI 1 and DALI 1 stories and nightmares that went there. No, we're not part of that anymore. Thank you. Right? So it's all DALI 2, all certified parts. But on top of that, the way you program your sites, and we did it a few times now with DALI, it is as easy as it was with WaveLinx in the past. So it's seamless, almost seamless for the end user, whoever's programming, maintaining the system. So that's the second reason, hybrid. And then the DALI option now that we just added, that it's easy and simple from the same app to be done, program, maintain, and whatsoever comes on, right? So, and then the third one, I mentioned integrated fixtures, integrated sensors, right? It's important as well. It simplifies your installer's life, and also long-term wise, it's easier. So the portfolio with integrated sensors is the third one.
Well, we're almost out of time here, and I just want to package this up because I think this is fascinating stuff, and I think ultimately this is where we're heading. Whether it's DALI at the end of the day, it seems like that's the case, but don't put my name against that prediction. But when it comes to DALI, I mean, yeah, we've seen it evolve. It's not the same DALI that it used to be. It is a brand new kind of approach to specifically data and manufacturing when it comes to how we make DALI work, how we make it interoperable, how we collect data. We've got D4i now and DALI Plus if you want to go the wireless route. So there's a lot more ways of utilizing DALI than what we had in the past, and it's much beefier now. And so, it's really kind of heartening to see that a manufacturer like Cooper is basically taking both arms and wrapping around it and saying, yeah, this is where we're heading, so we may as well embrace it at this point. Because of the fact that, in the United States, it is a very proprietary world we live in. And so to have that opportunity to connect to that interoperable communication, that open standard, while still utilizing a platform like WaveLinx, really does give us a much more success chance within this country, especially because we don't have, DALI techs just sitting around waiting to work on projects. Right. So to have a manufacturer basically saying, yeah, we own all the DALI stuff, our tech is going to take care of the DALI stuff, that's huge, because that already takes care of some of the major pain points when it comes to just doing your own homebrew DALI system. And on top of that, you can help guide some of these conversations that Ron and I were talking about in our last episode about cost of startup and programming for the project, which a lot of contractors just assume is going to be a, increased amount to the project without reducing the cost of labor to wire or anything like that. So there's just, there's a lot of education that can be benefited from this kind of approach. And so hopefully we are going to see that needle shift in this country, because all of the points that we've talked about, when it comes to adopting DALI, there are very few arguments left why we are staying with 0 to 10 and analog dimming and not just going full tilt into a digital lighting controls environment. And so, I agree. I think, this is where we're heading. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Is it going to happen 5 years from now? Hopefully. But eventually we will get there. And so seeing this kind of shift within our industry, especially in the U.S. market, is a really great thing to see.
Yeah, and education is key, as we mentioned a couple of times, right? So there are a few events happening where you can get to learn on DALI and any systems actually, but specifically to DALI, there are a few events, including there's a DALI Summit coming, North America Summit, pretty soon in September 16, 17. I think it's co-located with the Archlight in Dallas. Not only you can learn by watching PowerPoints, which we all like to do, but you can also be hands-on and really play with the system. So Cooper is going to be there, and we have what we call demo kits, where you can see the wireless and the wired side, and then, as I said, with one app program, the demo kits with 2 lights, and we have 4 lights in total. Then you have 2 extra lights that you can add, and then sensing, and then with the app you can play and create groups and pretend you're creating a class, right? So that's a good way to learn on it and understand how easy it got with DALI 2. And overall, as a WaveLinx hybrid system, our interoperability comes in play there. So that's one occasion. And there's also great videos on the LCA portal and other places that I encourage everybody to watch. And then, as I said earlier, if you didn't get involved, or maybe you got burned with the legacy DALI, just try it out. Go see DALI 2, and if you do a pilot, give feedback to manufacturer if it's not working well. But we all have to chime in and get it working there. So we need everybody in the value chain and every stakeholders to be on board. So I appreciate everybody that did try it out over the past years and got burned and are going to do a second round of a DALI project with DALI 2. But those are a few folks. I guess most of the people I talked to that did DALI 2 projects lately were pretty impressed about it. And that goes beyond DALI 2 with D4i and other projects. So there's a lot of outdoor fixtures that are using D4i platforms with other vendors type sensing, and it's working really well for cities and smart cities projects. So it's out there, it's already existing, and it's proven too. So a lot needs to be done. Don't get me wrong, certification wise and DALI wise, there's a much more, as you mentioned, coming. But we're at the point now, a turning point, as I said earlier, that definitely it solved a lot of problems that we used to have with DALI that we don't have anymore. So
awesome. Martin, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic conversation. Really appreciate everything that all manufacturers, especially, Cooper, are doing to really move the industry forward and try to move us in North America into these digital environments where we should be. I will tell you though, instead of one throat to choke, I prefer one phone call to make. It's a little cleaner that way, right? That is what I usually tell people. Look, we live in a proprietary world, and Cooper has an expansive portfolio. So you're in that, right? In a theatrical environment, we have a certain manufacturer we tend to lean towards in certain projects. So what I like to tell people is, hey, it's one phone call to make, and you have all of your resources and support that you need. So it's a little easier. It probably doesn't sound as bad. So maybe consider that for when you're talking.
Yeah, I'm going to add an addendum to it. So one phone call or one chat.
Yep, there you go. Perfect. Martin, thank you so much for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Awesome. I will close this out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's an official podcast of NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But huge shout out to Cooper, who is our sponsor for this episode, and their new WaveLinx DALI platform. If you haven't heard enough about it, I highly recommend you check out their website. They've got some really good stuff on there, like case studies for how you can implement it, and all of the ways that you can think of hybridizing DALI into either an existing or a new WaveLinx platform. So definitely check it out, cooperlighting.com. Thank you so much for joining me. And Martin, thank you. This was an awesome conversation.